Get the second countdown as well. Let's start that now. Hello, everyone, and welcome to, I think this is my 8th or 9th stream. I'm not sure. We've lost count already. Tonight, I am going to be speaking to Freek Berson, who is the guy who's got the book that I've got here. He's written a book on Bicep, and everyone should know Freek from doing lots of great sessions talking about Bicep and some demos. So thankfully, and I'm delighted to say he's come on tonight, and he's going to talk to me and show us some demos that are some new stuff from Bicep. So let me just introduce Freek right now. Good evening, Freek. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Thanks for coming on. Good to see you. Good to see you as always. So you're going to be talking to me tonight about Bicep, some of the new stuff, and some demos. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah. So,
Cool.
like you said in the talk right before this, right? I could talk about this for hours, but let's just try to keep it within 1 hour. So we're going to look at 3 interesting topics that I have lined up. So looking forward to it.
Yeah, I'm excited because I don't even know what they are. So this is good. So if you let me just, so I'll add your share screen. Yeah, cool. You want to just crack on, and I'll just keep an eye on chats and stuff.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So first of all, thank you so much for having me. It's great to be on this show. I did watch a couple of the earlier episodes. It's really cool. What you're
welcome
doing.
back after seeing that.
Yeah, cool. So so let's get started. So a quick introduction to myself. So my name is Freek Berson. I work as a product manager at Parallels. Parallels is part of Aludo.
All right,
and are you okay?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. And so I primarily work on enterprise mobility area and application and desktop delivery is what I do at Parallels. So think about technologies like VDI, RDSH, specifically, of course, with our product Parallels RAS. We're not going to talk about that today. Today is all about automation and infrastructure as code and all related topics to Bicep. So I'm also a Microsoft MVP on that topic. I have been in the MVP community for 13 years now. So I enjoy sharing knowledge at conferences like that. So let's just dive right in. So as I said, I have 3 topics aligned, and we're going to cover that. So I just have a couple slides just to do some introductions to get everyone on the same page here. To the later foundation, and then we'll go into a lot of live demos to take a look at 3 new cool features. At least I think they're cool. Hopefully you do as well at the end of this session, that are either into preview right now or just became GA.
Nice.
So we'll talk about those.
Looking forward to this.
So if there are any questions, feel free to.
I'll keep an eye on them. Yep, I'll let you know. Definitely.
Cool. Right. So. Just as a really quick introduction, hopefully probably everyone is aware about the Azure Resource Manager engine, right? So this is the front door, if you will, to all of the resource providers that lead to resources, right? Whether that's compute or storage or firewall or key vaults, whatever you're doing, you're communicating through the Azure Resource Manager engine, through the ARM engine. You can do that in a couple of different ways, using the Azure portal, right? That's the UI that you can browse to in the web interface, but also things like CLI and PowerShell, SDK, REST API, all kinds of different ways. But in this session, we'll take a look at the infrastructure as code approach. So that's based on templates. A lot of it, especially in the past, was based on ARM templates. Those were based on JSON language, JavaScript object notation. And in this session, of course, we'll take a look at the latest when it comes to Bicep, and as we'll see, that is a layer on top of ARM templates. So if you have been working with ARM templates in the past, you've probably recognized this. This is the JSON template, the ARM template, I would say back in the days, but I switched it to Bicep a long time ago. But maybe you're actually still using this today. In that case, it will definitely look familiar. So it has this fixed structure, right? So we have a parameter section which allows you to provide parameters during deployment to make this template reusable or use it for other purposes, for other deployments or other subscriptions perhaps. We have a section of variables, which allows you to define certain values that you use throughout your template as well. You can set up your own custom functions, but for the majority, you will probably spend time in the resources section, and that is the section where you define all of the resources you are going to create. Because this is based on a declarative approach. So if you compare that to, for example, PowerShell or Azure CLI or any other programming or scripting language, those are all imperative, right? So that is one line after another of code that's going to be executed. In this case, you create a template in which you define the end state and you provide that to Azure. So this looks quite simple, right? Just a couple of parameters, a couple of variables, and a couple of resources. It looks simple until you actually start using it and you end up with something like this. So this gave me a lot of nightmares years ago when I started using this. And that was like in 2016, 2017, when I started using ARM templates. And as you can see, there is a lot of complexity here, specifically not so much because of the ARM template itself, but more of the JSON language, the JavaScript object notation language, which enforces a lot of brackets and commas and semicolons, which makes it just ugly to read, if you will, right? And even harder to debug or to digest or start reading someone else's code. So I'm sure this looks familiar to you, Gregor, as well, right?
Yes. I'm lucky I didn't really do ARM templates, to be honest with you. I think I came along just at the right time. So Bicep has saved me from this. So I really like Bicep for that. Like, yeah. These things give me nightmares, to be honest with you.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. So we'll see some comparison examples in the demo in just a second as well. But of course, Microsoft also realized and got a lot of feedback on the complexity of these templates. So although the ARM engine and the ARM templates are very powerful, which I really think they are, they were looking at different ways to simplify this. So they looked at different languages. They looked at C#, also at Terraform or other existing technologies. But they figured we need to have our own way to simplify ARM templates without having to completely redo the ARM engine itself, which is really powerful. And that is how Bicep came to life, actually. So this was in September 2020 already. And this tweet by Marcus Onovich, which I'm sure everyone knows, he tweeted this back in September 2020. For me, that was the starting point to take a look at this technology. So back then it was called Project Bicep, which was the code name back then. But in the end, today it actually ended up as being the product name itself, which is kind of unique. Doesn't really happen quite often. But Bicep is now the product name, which means that the files actually have the .bicep extension. There's a logo, there's an icon, there's everything. So I really like it. So I like the way they emphasize that what is it that strengthened the ARM? It's the Bicep. So that's of course where the name is coming from. So I really like the new name and the logo. It kind of gives a nice
it's cool.
Swing to it. Yeah,
very cool.
And by the way, we also have Bicep stickers. So if you're interested in those, feel free to send me a tweet or a message later on. Happy to share.
They're very cool stickers, actually. Nice and the shiny ones.
They are. Yeah. So what is then Bicep? If you're not or less familiar, it is a DSL or domain-specific language, which means that it is a way to deploy resources into Azure in a, like I said, declarative way. So that means that you specify the end result into your template, and you pass that template along to the ARM engine without having to worry about what is the way to deploy this, what is the fastest way, what is the most efficient way, or what resource needs to be deployed first and later, etc. So in that sense, it's exactly the same thing that ARM templates do. So the question we always get is, does that mean that Bicep is going to replace ARM templates? And the answer there is definitely no, and we'll get to that why that is in just a second. But Bicep really drastically simplifies the template and the authoring experience. So it provides a much cleaner syntax. We'll see some examples in the demo in just a second as well. It provides you modularity, so the ability to extract pieces of code, put them into separate files, and reuse them within your department, or with other colleagues, or within your company, or even publicly if you want to. It's a lot of it is also about reusing code. So that abstraction layer, this diagram, I think, shows you on the right-hand side the best what that is like. So we still have that ARM engine, the big blue bar there, which still is our front door to all of the resources and all of the resource providers. On top of that, we have the ARM templates, which we still have. And on top of that, that is the Bicep language. So basically what they're doing with this language is they're abstracting away all of the complexity within the ARM template. So you, as the author of the Bicep templates, you will be authoring them into the Bicep language. You will then pass that Bicep file into the ARM engine. And what the ARM engine will do is it will transpile that Bicep file into an ARM template and then deploy or update or remove all the resources that are part of that template file. So you don't have to worry about all the complex JSON templates we just saw. You just pass your Bicep file into the ARM engine, and it will deploy the resources that are defined in there. That is today, because if you have been using Bicep since the early days, like since the 0.2, 0.3 version, you had to do that manually yourself by using the Bicep build commands to manually transpile it from Bicep in ARM and then feed that into the ARM engine. That is all gone. Today, if you start using Bicep, you can just deploy your Bicep file directly into the ARM engine. I mentioned the modularity as well. So extracting your code, put them into separate module files, which are really a big part of it. We'll see that in the demo in just a second as well. And this is entirely also open source. So that means that there's a GitHub location managed by Microsoft where you can contribute to the code, but also send in pull requests or bugs, fixes, or anything that you would like to have changed. And they're very much listening to feedback that's coming from the community. So I can definitely encourage you to take a look at that. So lastly, before we dive into some demos, this is a question that we get a lot. And when I say we, I also have to mention my presenting buddy, Esther Bartel. So we do a lot of these Bicep, what we call roadshow sessions throughout different conferences and community meetups, etc. And this is one of the most common questions we always get is, this is all great, but we've been using ARM templates, but how well is Bicep really being adopted? How well is it reused? Or how well is it used, or how well is it received? So this is a statistic that Microsoft shared a while back. So this is the number of resources that are deployed over a period of 30 days, so within 1 month, using the Bicep language. And as you can see, this is a statistic from May 21, right, which is already a long time ago. But the reason we're looking at this month is that was the month of the first release of the 0.3 version. Although the name doesn't really imply it, it was the first production-ready version of Bicep. And back then, already 900,000, so close to 1 million resources were being deployed in a single month based on the Bicep language, which is quite impressive if you think about, the fact that it was really recently introduced. So they did share the same result later on of August 22. Where it suddenly was 22 million resources deployed in a single month, right? So this is not cumulative, right? This is actual resources being deployed in a period of 30 days in a single month, and back then based on the 0.9 version. So this data is, of course, already quite old. So I did actually reach out to some of the product team members literally yesterday to see if they would come up and were able to share some of the recent statistics and data. So this is brand new, but this is the number of resources that we were deployed last month. Unique resources was 55 million. So that's a lot, right? So
now I've got a graph that shows you how busy I am.
yeah, I'm sure that a lot of these are probably mine as well. But so the idea about this diagram, of course, this is not 100% accurate, right? You have to think about things like redeployments and removals and deletes and etc. But what it does show you is the adoption rate from the early days into the version that we are today. So that is what this diagram is all about. So hopefully that answers.
Interesting to see the stats for ARM, just using ARM templates on their own, but I don't know if you could. Yeah. How do they get these stats? So I take it. I noticed like in some of the templates they've got like bits that are obviously sending stats back to Microsoft, but
some of them is based on the metadata as well. So some of the XML data that's in there as well.
Yeah,
and that is of course also what they mentioned when they shared with these statistics. They were like, this is not 100% accurate, but this is this is what we measured at least on our site, and this is a worldwide number, which is quite cool to see. Yeah. Right. So hopefully we'll see an even larger bar at the next presentation we'll hopefully be doing. So that's it in terms of slides that I wanted to share. So I want to make sure that I have enough time to spend on these 3 topics to demo. Unless, Gregor, there are any questions?
No, just Alan was asking, do we have stats for ARM? It'd be interesting to see if the stats have went down or they're still, I'd imagine the stats for ARM templates usages went down while Bicep's coming out. I'd imagine.
That's a great question. I don't have them, but it definitely is something. It could be interesting to follow up on that for sure. Yeah.
One thing I would say is if you're writing ARM templates, still, I say still as if it's a bad thing, but I would seriously look at Bicep. I think Bicep would make your life much more pleasurable than writing.
Definitely, yeah.
Even if you're not a coder, like you don't have to be a coder, but like I would still 100% every day of the week I would still try and do Bicep over ARM templates.
Yeah, and not even just the language, but also all of the VS Code extensions that are available in VS Code by now as well, which literally help you and guide you from A to Z to start deploying and creating the resources with things like the visualizer and code completion and IntelliSense and all of that. So, definitely.
We'll see some of that in your demos. Yeah, cool.
Yeah, so these are the 3 topics I want to take a look at. So first of all, Bicep parameter files. We'll take a look at that and why that is interesting and why it's taken quite some time to get there with parameter files for Bicep. We'll take a look at the opinionated formatting, which is all about being able to customize how the automatic formatter formats your documents to make sure that it's properly formatted. We'll take a look at that. And the last one is probably my favorite topic, at least over the last couple of months. You probably heard about this. This coming up is the concept of deployment stack, which allows you to have resources be consolidated, like into a logical grouping or into a group, and deploy that as a whole towards Azure, and also be able to destroy it as a whole towards Azure. So some of these are in preview right now. Some of them have just been GA'd. So we should be able to take a look at that.
Just before we jump into the demo, right? Can you explain to people why infrastructure as code is important? Because I know why, but some people think that I've seen customers basically say to me, why would I want to write scripts to just deploy something once? Because they don't really understand the fact that like you might have to run it multiple times. Or talk a little bit about the advantages of infrastructure as code, if you don't mind, because some people just don't quite understand it, I think.
Yeah. So I think one of the biggest things is avoiding configuration drift, right? So you could deploy something. You could go to the Azure portal and you could deploy a virtual machine or something else. Someone else could actually change that into the portal as well. So you lose the configuration at some point. Using templates, you are definitely sure that the resource out there is exactly deployed in that manner. That's one thing. The other thing could also be if you have multiple environments. So let's say that you have a testing staging environment, a pre-production environment, and a production environment. You probably want to deploy those in exactly the same way and also in an automated way. So you could use your template, and just by changing the parameters, you could deploy your full deployment into a test environment, and then change a couple of parameters and deploy it into pre-production and in production.
That's the light bulb moment, I think.
100% certainty that all of these deployments are deployed in exactly the same way, and not dependent on someone clicking the UI or anything else.
When I speak to customers, I always say, I want your dev environment to be the same as your production environment. And not everybody always wants that, but like at least with this, you can deploy separate resources and they're exactly the same. And I always say, like, imagine if you want to do even failovers, if you want to spin up a new region really quickly, are you going to go in and manually do everything, or do you want to run a script to press run and yeah? So yeah, ClickOps is bad, absolutely.
Yep. Yeah, and deployment stacks makes that even bigger and better, as we'll see in just a second in the last demo as well.
Yeah, cool.
So we'll actually take a look at
Awesome.
literally stacking those resources and deploying it all at once. Cool. So let me open up VS Code here. And let's start with the first one, which is the parameter files. So
what I'll do is I'll make the screen a little bit bigger, right, and we'll just hide behind the you can still hear us.
Oh, perfect.
We'll do that, make it bigger. Yeah, that's better.
Cool. So this is a very small Bicep file, right? Just for demo purposes, to give you an idea of what that looks like. So we have, and it's similar to ARM templates, of course. We have a parameter section, which allows us to define a couple of parameters. And as you can see, some of these also have default values. And there's just a single resource in here. In this case, it's an Azure Virtual Desktop host pool. But for this demo, it could have been any resource. I just picked one that I'm familiar with, and that's easy and easy to see inside this template, right? So I could deploy this to Azure, and that's because most of these parameters actually have default values. So if I would deploy this directly and pass this directly to the ARM engine, it will only ask me for one parameter because it doesn't have a default value, which in this case is the host pool name. So there's a couple of different ways to pass those parameters with the deployment itself, so during deployment time. One of the most common ways to do that is using a parameters file. And that in itself is not new, right? We've been having parameter files since ARM templates as well, and they kind of look like this, right? So this is a parameters.json file, which contains the values for each of these parameters. Of course, it should have contained a value for this host pool name here as well. That's not the point, but this is the way we've been using that for Bicep as well. And the reason is, and that is the most common question we got as well if we do this demo, is this is all great, right? This is a Bicep file. This is easy to read, easy to author, not all of that complexity syntax compared to the JSON template. But then if I wanted to use parameter files up until the release, at least, of Bicep param files, I still had to switch back to JSON with this with all this code complexity that is in here. That all changed with the concept of Bicep param files, as you can see. And here's, by the way, it also has a couple of new logos, which of course are still in the Bicep shape as well. And this is that file. So let's do a side-by-side comparison here. Let's get this out of the way. So left and right do the exact same thing, right? So left is how we used to do it, which is 30 lines of code, and left is only 10, right? So this on the right-hand side, did I say left-hand side? The right-hand side is the Bicep param file in the new structure, right? So super easy and very similar to how Bicep files are being built up with the param keyword, with the name, the equal sign, and the value in it. That's it, right? So not all of the complexity that is in there. You do see something new here, which is the using keyword. This allows us to connect the Bicep file towards the parameter file, which also gives us some IntelliSense in this Bicep param file as well. So for example, if I would accidentally forget to provide this parameter, if I would do param here, control space, you would actually get the value that was missing. I could provide a value and enter it here. That IntelliSense is there because of the using command, command here that connects the Bicep file towards the parameter file. So hopefully you all agree that the right-hand side is much easier to create, to digest, and to read and to author, right?
Yeah, I like it. Very cool.
Yep. So some of the ways actually to create these in an automated way. So you might have seen that for ARM templates and back in the day for Bicep as well. So let me actually remove these parameter files. So I have that Bicep file here. A very easy way to create the parameter file is just right-click it and say generate parameters file. This option is not new. What is new, however, is this option, which allows you to choose between, do I still want to have the good old JSON file or the new Bicep param file? Of course, I'm going to click this one. We have the option to do only the required properties or perhaps all. In this case, I'll select all, and here's the Bicep param file, just like that. So No need to create these from scratch. You can just right-click and create them right from within VS Code. What I could also do, if for whatever reason, if I still wanted to take a look at the JSON format, I could right-click this file and also say build parameters file, and I could get the JSON equivalent of that file again, maybe for reverse engineering or for whatever reason, if you want to take a look. So that's Bicep param files. And again, it was a very common question back in the day when Bicep started. We still had to use the JSON files. We can now use these nice and clean Bicep param files.
Awesome.
Cool. Any questions on that?
Don't think so. I didn't actually know you could generate them like that. I haven't actually used them, but I would probably have typed that out. Not knowing me.
Yeah,
so that's good.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that are actually inside the VS Code engine because of the integration with Bicep as well. Yeah, so you might also be familiar with something, and shouldn't have been part of this demo, but I'm going to show it anyway. Is the visualizer, right? I could click this icon here and get a nice visualization of what this template actually does, right? And this is also interactive, so I could drag it around and redo to what it was. It is also live updates. So as I am authoring code on the left-hand side, the right-hand side is actually automatically updated along. So there's a lot of things that are inside that VS Code extension. Another thing, if I would right-click here, I could also do insert resource. So for example, if I would have an existing resource that I want to take a look at the Bicep code, I simply copy the resource ID, paste it in here, and I instantly get all the Bicep code that is related to that specific resource. Or I could build the ARM template from this, but I can also deploy, right-click and deploy right from within VS Code towards Azure, the visualizer, like I said. And this is really a big part of the improvement of the authoring experience, I would say.
Without doubt, yeah. Awesome.
Cool. So let's take a look at the next topic, which is the opinionated formatting. So as an introduction, this is another Bicep file, and as you can see, it has some long lines of code, right? So of course, these are just sample values just to give you an idea, but some of these actually go beyond, in this case, the 80 characters. So I did add this visualizer line here inside VS Code, which is an optional thing to do, just for the sake of this demo, to show you how long these lines actually are. So this is the 80 character limit. So the opinionated formatting, you might be familiar with the original format. Let me actually just show you that real quick. So this is just another Bicep file, and let's say that I made some mistakes in additional spaces here, and this format is not really properly formatted. This template is not really properly formatted. You could go into the command palette and say format document, or use Shift-Alt-F. And the document is now formatted towards the standard that is available by default in VS Code, right? So the additional spaces, for example, are now gone. That's not new, but what is new is that you're able to also modify the reasoning, if you will, behind the formatter. So let's take a look at that example. So this one. So let's say, for example, it's a very common thing to do within any programming or infrastructure language, is to trim down the number of lines, right? The longer the lines get, the more you have to probably scroll horizontally as well. It becomes quite annoying. So 80 lines of code is quite a common standard. So if I would go into the formatter today, and I will format this, nothing really happens, right? It still remains way beyond this 80 lines. So what I'm able to do is make a change inside the Bicep config.json file. And yes, that's another JSON file still, but it does allow you to make some changes. So some of the things that are in here are, for example, the linter rules, which allow you to comply to your own coding standards. Not going to go into that, but it's a really interesting thing to use as well, linter rules. We have module aliases if you want to use module registries inside Azure. But it also allows you to enable experimental features, which, as you can see, based on the list, is something that I do more often. But one of the things here is the pretty printing formatting feature. So if I enable that, just set it to true. These are just a couple of sample formatting rules that I think are, at least for this demo, are something that I should comply to, or at least something that I like to have. One of the things is the width of 80 characters. So now if I would go back to the same Bicep file, watch what happens to these, for example, these 4 variables. So as you can see, this one will probably not be shortened because it's not beyond the 80. The second one, the long one, is just below the 80. And of course, these 2 are way beyond. So again, if I would do the formatting here, this is now nicely formatted into multiple lines without me having to worry about it. So that's, of course, great for me. But if someone else decides, I don't want to have 80 characters, I want to have 100, he will change the config file for himself and have that format available for him and make it easier to read and to author and to help author to other code that someone else authored as well. That's just variables, but we also have, for example, it's a very common scenario as well, is conditional deployments. So in this case, I am deploying a resource group, which of course is a very common object, but I'm saying that I want to add a condition here to only deploy it if this parameter or this condition is true. So in this case, it's a Boolean. So in this case, if the deploy resource group Boolean is set to true, it will actually deploy the resource. But as you can see, this also goes beyond the 80 lines. So I'm just going to highlight it just for the demo purposes. And it will be nicely formatted into the new line here, which is much easier to read because the if statement, the condition is now properly on a new line. Another very common scenario, and we touched about modules as well. So this is the declaration of a module. So that allows me to reuse code that was defined in another Bicep file. So you use the keyword module followed by a symbolic name and then followed by the Bicep file, which essentially tells the ARM engine to deploy all of the resources that are in this Bicep file as a module. You don't pass it a couple of parameters, location, etc. But for now, let's focus on this section here, which is looping, right? So in this case, I'm telling to not deploy this once, this module, but actually deploy it multiple times based on this for loop. So I'm essentially saying that for each AVD control plane, inside AVD control planes, deploy this entire Bicep file, so multiple times. Again, if I would do that formatting, it now is nicely formatted into a new line and makes it even better to read and to work with. Last example in this area is this if statement here. So in this case, I'm also using the module, actually the same module. So I'm selecting a scope here. So I'm basically saying that if a new resource group is required, so this question mark is the if sign, of course, then use the name, or else use the existing resource group. Same thing, if I would command let and format this, it will be nicely formatted into a new line. So that again adds to the coding experience in VS Code with all the options that I just quickly shown as well, to really help you start authoring these templates from scratch, and even with this opinionated formatting, have it be formatted in the way you would like to see it.
It does make a good job of it. I was wondering how it was going to do the if statement, but yeah, it does. It looks really nice. I like that.
Yeah. The one thing that I did find out, and I think that this is actually a bug, because of course I started to push it to the limits and test all of the existing keyword right here. So in this case, I am not deploying a resource, but I'm pointing to an existing resource group.
Doesn't do it.
And if I do this, the existing keyword is now gone.
Right?
Oh, so that's a bug that I probably should report, because this will definitely fail, right? It will also get a warning now that the resource declaration is missing because it doesn't know that's an existing keyword right now. So, of course, it's still an experimental feature, right?
Yeah.
I'm just living on the edge and testing it. Yep.
Very cool.
So the last, and that's probably a larger topic, is the deployment stacks. So
Steven's looking forward to this. So am I.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah, he's heard good things. He's obviously read your blog post.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So then he's going to see some familiar things, but that's okay.
That's all good.
Okay. So let's dive into those deployment stacks. Let's start with the PS1. So deployment stack. So what does it allow you to do? It allows you to create logical groupings of resources, right? So what the thing you could do is you could group resources together. That makes sense because they have the same lifetime, or they are updated within the same update scheme or something else. And these resources could be across different resource groups, different subscriptions, and even different management groups as well. So basically what you tell the ARM engine, once you deploy something towards Bicep, all these resources are a logical group, they are a stack, and treat them as a deployment stack. That's essentially what you're doing. So the way you deploy this is a couple of ways, but we'll take a look at the AZCLI way. So this commandlet deploys an Azure stack, right? So you do AZ stack group create. You provide it with a name, in this case, my AVD. So you probably guessed it's going to deploy an Azure Virtual Desktop environment. You're going to specify the resource group where this Azure stack, where this deployment stack is connected to. And you're going to provide the template name, which is just another Bicep file. It could contain one resource. It could have multiple resources, modules, whatever you're doing. And it also allows you to provide deny settings. So we'll cover that as well. What it basically says is deny delete, which means that no one can delete the resources that are part of this deployment stack. So that's a very specific restriction. So that's not related to regular permissions that you can do on resource groups and on resources. This is a permission on a different level, which essentially denies everyone to delete these resources, which of course is a security mechanism. You can, of course, also create exceptions to that for specific users or specific app registrations, for example. So once you have deployed this, what you end up with, and let me just open up the Azure portal because I have already deployed this. I have a resource group here, and new in this the Azure portal here is now the concept of deployment stacks. So if I go to this deployment stack, this is the stack that I deployed. And the first thing you'll notice is that you get an overview of all of the resources that are attached to this deployment stack. So in this case, it's a workspace, 2 different host pools, and 2 different application groups. So a couple of things that I can do from this deployment stack as well is I could redeploy it, right? So similar to the way I could redeploy it from AZCLI or PowerShell, I can also do that from the portal. So I actually can change the template here, change the parameters, can also do a visualization of that entire stack. And here are some of the interesting things as well. One of the things is the update behavior. So currently, as you can see, it's set to detach, which is the default behavior, which means that if I would remove a resource from the Bicep file or the Bicep declaration, it will not be removed from Azure, but it will rather be only detached from the stack. So it will still remain in Azure, but the relationship between the stack and between the resource will be cut off, right? The other option we could do, if for whatever reason you always want to delete this, simply set this to delete. And in that case, if any of the resources that are attached to that stack are removed from the Bicep file and you would redeploy it, those resources will also be removed from Azure. You can also do additional lockings in there to set it to cannot delete or read only. We'll cover those in just a second as well. What's also interesting is I can take a look at all the other properties in here as well. So of course I can take a look at the properties like the generic Azure resource properties, right? So an Azure stack, just to make it clear, is just another Azure resource. It has its own API version, its own resource name, etc., resource type. And these are some of the properties that we've used. These are some of the input values, so the parameters that we've used for this deployment. We didn't really use any output values, but if we would have, they would be showing here. And this is a link to the deployment itself. So as you can see, there's a deployment here, which is the Bicep deployment containing the last deployment that we did in this case. And lastly, there's the deny assignments. So because I set it to deny delete, which was one of the options that I provided into the AZCLI commandlet, it now says deny delete. And in this case, I did not provide any excluded principles or excluded actions. So what I could do is add a couple of principles that I do want to allow to remove these resources, just to have maybe some kind of fallback scenario, but also include some specific actions on those resources that you still want to allow. So, and of course, within the resource group itself, we have the objects themselves, right? So these are now also deployed as part of this Azure stack. So let's take a look at the Bicep file that was used for this deployment. And as you can see, we're pointing to 25 main.bicep, and this is that file. So again, this is just another Bicep file, nothing special about it. And in this case, we're also using a module. So in this case, we actually also changed the target scope. So by default, you're probably aware that if you do a Bicep or ARM template deployment, the default scope is a resource group, which means that all the resources are going to be deployed into a single resource group. If that's not what you want, if you want to deploy resources into multiple resource groups, make sure to set the target scope into a higher level, which is then subscription. So this Bicep file takes a couple of parameters, and all of them in this case have default values, just for simplicity's sake for this demo. We're deploying one resource, which is actually not deploying it, but pointing to that existing resource again. So we're pointing to an existing resource group. And then we're leveraging this module here, which is another Bicep file. And we're going to say that the scope is RGAVDP, which is a symbolic name towards that existing group. And we're passing it these parameters, right? So this is just another Bicep file that leverages a module in this case, and nothing special in regards to deployment stack. So of course, that module file, you probably guessed what that is going to deploy, because we already saw it in the Azure portal. But it has the declaration of one host pool, one application group, another host pool, another application group, and a workspace where all of these application groups are also attached. So that's the deployment that we're doing. So let's now actually make a change to see how that deployment stack deals with that. Let's see. Let's make a change to the main file here. And I also already added these as a comment just to make it easier to make those changes. So we're going to change the load balancing type. We're going to change the friendly name. And we're going to change the validation mode parameter. Going to save it. And then run the same commandlet again. So the first thing we get here is this warning saying that the deployment stack, AVD stack you're trying to create already exists. Well, we knew about that. In the current subscription, the following action will be applied to any resource that are no longer part of the deployment. So that's the delete or detach action that I talked about. So it's going to provide us here with the information that in this case, we're using the detach method, which means that if we would remove a resource from the Bicep file, it will not be deleted, but rather detached. So I'm going to say yes here. And what we'll now do, it will take a couple of seconds. It will compare all of the resources that are part of that Bicep file, compare it to all of the resources that are attached to the deployment stack that we're deploying to, and it will make all the necessary changes. So changes to resources in terms of updates. It will detach any resources that we didn't do that yet, but detach any resources that are removed. To make sure that we are complying again to that full deployment stack. So while we wait for that to run, it takes a couple of seconds to complete. Of course, you can do the same thing using PowerShell as well. If you're a PowerShell fan, you can also use the new commandlet, which is new AZ subscription deployment stack, which is a mouthful, but it's of course the equivalent of the PowerShell, the equivalent by using PowerShell instead, which is the same thing, providing the name, providing the location, the template file, and the resource group. In this case, I left out the other properties, but you could probably get the idea. So of course, this is a live demo, so it definitely takes a little bit more than just a couple of seconds, but there we go. So the thing that you get here, let me just make a little bit more space, is an overview of what has been changed, right? But rather than going through all of this code, let's just actually switch back to the Azure portal and see it live. So here's the host pool again. And if I go to the properties, we can see that it now has the my updated friendly name, that the load balancing is now set to dev first. And what's the other change? Validation environment is now set to yes. So what it did is it compared all of the Bicep code within that stack to all of the resources that are attached to the stack, and make sure that we make the change that are needed based on that stack. Cool. Any questions so far?
I have lots, but I'll wait till the end. That's okay.
Okay. Okay. So let's now actually also start to detach a couple of resources, just because this is a live demo. Let's see how far we can push it. So let's revert all of these changes. So we're back to the original template. So we'll also see these changes be applied. And the other thing we're going to do is remove a couple of resources. So let's just remove this host pool entirely, this application group entirely, and yeah, that's probably enough, right? So I still also have to remove this reference here to make it a viable Bicep file again. We're just going to ignore these warnings. These are just parameters we're not going to be using in this case. But we have now removed 2 resources from this Bicep file, which is connected to that deployment stack. I saved it, and we're now going to run that stack again. And as you can see, I did not use the delete resources. So again, it's going to use that detach method of actually detaching those resources. So let's run it. And it will take, again, another couple of seconds to complete. And here's that same warning again, or at least notification again, that we're going to use the detach method. So now what it will notice is that a couple of resources, and we can just ignore these warnings. These are the parameters that we didn't use, that we declared but didn't use. But it will now take a look at the Bicep file that's part of this deployment stack. It will notice that a couple of resources are actually removed. And because we set it to detach rather than remove, it will detach the resources from the deployment stack and still have them be available unattached, if you will, inside the same resource group. So this is the update mechanism to remove resources. So let's wait for that to complete. Let's actually just switch to the Azure portal, because the portal might actually be quicker than the output commandlets. So we'll see. So let's go back to the deployment stack. Open the stack. There we go. So these resources are now detached, right? So we still have these 3 resources here that are attached to the deployment stack, and these are now detached from the stack. So they still reside in Azure, but they are not managed by the stack anymore. So to confirm that, let's go back to the resource group. Hold on, my monitor is not working with me. There we go. We still have those 5 resources, right? So the resources still exist, but the relationship has been broken between the deployment stack and the actual resource. So you might be wondering, how long is that going to be in this detached state? This is just showing you the last state of the deployment. If I would redeploy the same deployment stack now again, you will notice that these 2 will be removed, because this is just showing the last status of the last deployment that you have done. I'm not going to build up any history, of course, of all of the detached resources, but it gives you a nice and clear indication of which resources are currently managed, which are not, and which are potentially also removed. Cool. You said you had a couple of questions, Gregor.
Yes. Let me put us back in here. Right. What's the main benefits of these deployment stacks? What do you see as like the main benefit of using these? And Like, I'm sure people have. Why would I use this? You know?
Yeah, no, definitely. So it's one of the things is I think that it started out as a way to also destroy all the resources that are at some point part of your deployment. So if you are familiar with Terraform, you might know that they have something that's called the destroy function, right, which allows you to basically remove and revert anything that you created as part of a deployment. This allows you to do that. So even though I just showed you an example where all the resources are into a single resource group, that's of course the most simple example to do, but these could have been crossing over different resource groups, different subscriptions, even management groups, and it allows you to manage that across all of those different locations because they are logically grouped together. That's one thing. And the other thing is, of course, also preventing accidental removing, because if you are deploying these resources, if you think they should be part of the logical group, that's also probably a good reason to not remove one of those resources, because other resources might depend on it or not. So, of course, you have other ways to prevent resources from being deleted, but this allows you to create that logical grouping, if you will, that you have.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Sure.
What about these deny settings? So if you do deny delete and if you like the deny delete, I couldn't speak there, and then you deploy this stack, does that mean that I literally can't go in and delete these resources in the portal?
Yep. Yeah.
So
I can
see when you do this, who's the? I'm trying to think of the security around this. Like, who is this getting deployed as? Is this getting deployed as you because you're doing it from Bicep?
Yeah. Yeah, like, so I will of course be the identity that actually deployed this.
Yes.
But I myself, in this case, would not be able to remove these resources. If I would go into the Azure portal and select these resources and click delete, it will actually say and also show a warning. I'm not sure if we have.
Yeah, I was going to ask
it takes a little bit of time, but we might be able to actually see.
I've got loads of time. I've got all the time in the world if you have. Why don't you try and delete one of these resources? What is it actually?
Yeah, let's pick.
Can we see who's it deployed by to begin with? I think it's deployed by. Is it your account because you ran the Bicep?
Yeah, it's deployed by me. But if I would select this delete button here, and I think it's associated, but that's not. Let's do an app group.
I'm going to ask lots of awkward questions here, but okay, so you can do that.
So it says, however, so the permission to action, blah, blah, blah. However, the access is denied because of deny assignment with the name deny assignment created by the deployment stack, blah, 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 pointing to the resource ID of the deployment stack. So it does tell the difference between regular role-based access control, that is, of course, also part of Azure, or this resource being actually attached to a resource. So I even like, although this is a pretty, a lot of information, what I like is the fact that it actually points out, look, this is a resource that is probably part of another deployment because it's attached to this stack.
So my brain is now thinking, if you leave the company that we are working in the same company, and Freek, you leave, how do I remove these resources? Do I have to go in and run this Bicep? How do I get rid of these resources then?
So anyone that would be able to use that to redeploy the deployment stack would be able to do that.
So I would need to run the scripts again, basically.
Yeah, that's the idea. This is just a deny on those specific resources that are preventing anyone from accidentally removing the resource itself.
Which is fine. Yeah, I was just thinking, like, how would that work?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. So
everyone needs to make sure they check in their deployment scripts once they're using deployment stacks into source control. So if they leave the company, people, okay. I mean,
or at least have access to the stack itself, right? So the deployment stack is, as you can see, part of the resource group here. So as long as you have access to this stack and you have the proper RBAC permissions to the stack, you're able to modify it. Yeah.
Okay, I can just see managed services going, I can't delete this, and I'm like, yeah, you need to do this, and right, okay, no, that's fine.
Yeah.
I mean, I really like the idea. It makes sense.
Yep.
Yeah, it's good. I like that.
Cool.
So what's available now? Are all of these 3 features available now?
Literally, I was testing this yesterday because, as you can see, I browsed to the regular portal.
Yeah, I did see that. I was going to ask you. I thought you'd went to preview, to be honest. But
yeah, yesterday I actually had to browse to the RC portal, to the release candidate. but I think it was somewhere today or the day before that this option actually became available in the public version of the portal
Nice.
itself, which you can also see, by the way, and that's also in the preview only today, is this view cost as well. So we're able to view the cost of this deployment stack as a whole, which also makes sense
There's
that you want to do
delete stack
cost
is at the
estimates.
top there.
Yeah.
So
it's
in my head, what happens if you create the deployment stack? You leave the company, and I want to create a resource. Must I use Bicep to add the resource to that deployment stack? Could I do that in the portal?
No, you can do it from the portal as well. So,
Right, okay.
well, there's no UI way to do it, but you could, of course, browse to the stack here, go to the deployment, and redeploy it, and change the parameters.
Right.
There's no UI way of actually just, you might want to be able to drag it to, drag it to the stack and have it be attached. Could be, but yeah, today is just based on.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Cool.
Based on the templates. Yeah.
Nice feature. Yeah, I like that.
Cool.
So if you get the latest version of the Bicep and Visual Studio Code, you can. Is there any templates?
Yeah,
for
so
this?
you need the latest version of ACCLI or PowerShell, of course, in order to do it, and then you can use the commandlet AC deployment stack create or build or update. Yeah, so that's available, and the documentation is already there as well. So if you go to the docs pages, there's documentation on deployment stacks, or take a look at the blog post that I created.
Yeah. Let me see if I can find that real quick.
That's okay. Just for everyone to know that information is out there. So, last couple of minutes. So I did want to share just some information for anyone who's looking to get started with Bicep in general. I always tend to share these links on the slide now. So, of course, the doc pages, which already contain information about the deployment stacks and the Bicep param files. The other is not there yet. I'll hopefully see that coming soon as well. But there's also a Bicep monthly community call. So I'm not sure if everyone is aware of that. This is a initiative by the product team, which is behind ARM and Bicep and all kinds of template technology. And what they basically do is every month they host a Bicep community call, and it's open to anyone. It's not just MVPs or a selected group. If you go to this link and you sign up, you get an invite to join that community call, which is great because it allows you to hear about the latest things like these technologies, or they also do things like road mapping or take active questions as well. So that's the survey link to get involved.
Awesome.
Of course, the GitHub location, right? GitHub.com/Azure/Bicep. That is where you can get all of the sources, the latest Bicep files, and all the documentation as well. And if you really want to get started from scratch, don't know where to start, there's this Bicep learning path available as well, which literally takes you to all of the steps of creating your first Bicep file, declaring your first resource, what are parameters, what are variables, what are modules, and it takes you through all of these learning steps as part of that path. So probably also an interesting one to check out.
Yeah, someone on this call wrote a book as well, did they not?
Or take a look at the book.
So the name of the book's just gone along the bottom if anyone's interested.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah.
Brilliant. Just before you go, Freek, where can people get in touch with you? So I've got your Twitter as that's your Twitter profile name.
Yeah, I just put it on the screen as well. So Twitter is at fberson. GitHub is github.com/fberson, or feel free to connect on LinkedIn. That's all fine as well. If it weren't just to get some of the Bicep stickers, make sure to reach out, or you have additional questions.
Oh, we've got lots, because maybe a few people reaching out.
Yeah, I have lots of stickers. So feel free to reach out with additional questions. Happy to answer those. And again, thank you so much for having me.
No problem. Just before you go, let me just finish up by saying a couple of things. First of all, thank you for coming on and demoing this. That was excellent. Yeah, brilliant.
Sure.
If anyone wants to join me on the stream, we're kind of starting to look at doing demos like what Freek just showed us. So if you want to come on and demo something and talk I'm going to try and ask people to do demos as well, if that's okay. So if you want, you can sign up there. I'm trying to do it Monday to Friday, 7 till 10 p.m. UK time. If that time doesn't suit, I'll try and make time during the day, but we'll see how that goes. And last but not least, there's one comment. Alan's just asked this question, Freek. Is there anywhere to get both print and ebook as one purchase for your book?
Good question.
I don't think there is an ebook that came. I have your book.
There is. No, there is. So you can go to Amazon.com and actually choose to select the paperback or the hard copy or the ebook. There's no. Amazon doesn't allow you to do a combined package, unfortunately. So sorry about that. Although all of the source code that is pointing out in the book is available on my GitHub as well. So all of the code that I use throughout the book, which is quite a lot, is there on my public GitHub. So feel free to check that out.
Brilliant. Okay, right. I'm just going to play a thank you video, and then that's us wrapped up. So first of all, Freek, thanks for coming on again. Much appreciated. Hope to speak to you soon. Hopefully, I'll bump into you at a conference in the near future.
Hopefully. Yeah. Thanks.
I'll speak to you in 2 seconds once I just play this.